Good day, my name is Tina Mamgudra. You are watching Diary Series of Deaf People, presenting from Cape Town, and I'm with my colleagues from Gauteng. Joining us in studio today is Dr. Mmusi Maimane, the founder of BOSA. Good day, sir. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon and good afternoon to fellow South Africans. And what a privilege to be part of this particular forum. It is, I count it a great privilege.
Thank you so much, sir. It's our pleasure to have you with us in studio today. So, what makes BOSA different from the other political parties? And why should South African citizens, especially people living with disability, trust you with their votes now?
First and foremost, South Africans with disability are an important component of our society. Secondly, South Africans with disability never want their disability to limit them from being integrated and being treated in the same way as you would any other citizen cognizant of their disability and making provision for it, yet they want to be integrated. And the reason I start there is because when you say you want to build one South Africa, we are not a party that stands up and says we're a party for blacks or a party for whites or a party for coloreds or Zulus or this one. We're a party for all South Africans. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction, there isn't another party in South Africa that stands for that. Because many other parties preach it, but they don't do it. When I look at our candidate list as BOSA, there are black people, white people, Indian people, colored people. There are South Africans with disability that are on our candidate list. That's important because that tells you that this organization says it must work for everybody. Secondly, I want to say categorically, if you then go out and you invite the community, the disabled community must be able to pick for itself more candidates that can represent that community in parliament. And the reason why we want to do that, or in municipalities or wherever, because the reason we want to do that is because we want always to be clear that as someone with disability, you are the most competent person to speak on behalf of disability. Thirdly, I hold the absolute view that because we are that organization, we are the future of this country. We are the future that attracts the most ethical people when we are not divisive. We are competent in that we are able to create policy that is able to heal for government. For example, national policy says that 2% of national budgets must be spent on people with disability. And yet, in all fairness, most departments in the country don't achieve that. So we hold people to account to make sure that there's investment that goes into that space. So my prayer and cry is that when we deal with the competence of government, we need representation that comes from the community. But secondly, we need to fight for the economic inclusion of people with disability and then to deal with healthcare for people with disability. Let me use a case in point that I've been fighting for. When we deal with health and health insurance, a young woman came to speak to me in KZN and she had a skin condition that meant that she suffered from albinism, which meant that for her, the state needed to provide compensation for that. And one of the things that the state needed to do was to give her sun protection that was at a much higher level. But that's not covered in our healthcare policy. But we needed to hear from her, explain that issue, so that in future, anyone who suffers from albinism can be guaranteed sun protection or sun protection factor cream that is the highest, and the state must pay for it. Because if you give her a disability grant, her grant alone cannot pay for that. Now, that's a fairly simpler one. Imagine what happens to someone who is deaf, someone who requires different interventions, someone who needs a wheelchair, someone who needs all of these interventions. The best people to advocate for them are people who go through that, but the best people to legislate for it is all of us together, because I don't need to be disabled to fight for disabled people, just like I don't need to be a woman to fight for women, or I don't need to be black to fight for black people. This requires a collective. And so BOSA is that organization. And that's why I think when people vote, not only must they trust the leadership, but they know that they are the people who can work for BOSA.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mmusi Maimane, for your time. Without wasting much of your time, I'll be handing over to my colleague in Gauteng, Kabelo. Over to you, Kabelo.
Thank you, Tina, and good day to you, Dr. Mmusi. My question for you is, since persons with disabilities are not facing real inclusivity in education, workplace, economic growth, and development in the country as a whole, how will your party ensure that persons with disabilities are included in those sectors?
Firstly, I want to say the education budget is insufficient for people with disability. Now, take education as a simple one, because in many instances, you find that the needs of someone with disability go broader than the 13,000 rands we spend just about annually for every learner. A learner with disability has got other complications. Now, this is a personal matter for me. I have a niece who has Down syndrome. Her needs are profound. 13,000 will never be enough. She needs additional support, extra time, additional tutoring, making sure that curriculum is dealt for her. And ultimately, the school that she goes to has got infrastructure that responds to that issue. Because when it's said and done, if she ends up using a wheelchair, you need appropriate ramps. If she's going to sit in a classroom, she needs a teacher who is trained and a specialist for that. The psychosocial issues are then required so that there's support for her in her school. Now, as Build One South Africa, not that you make the personal public policy, but I went out of my way to say, having heard her, how do I help fight for more children all across the country in the education sector? So the first is budget, the second is infrastructure, the third is curriculum, to make sure that curriculum is integrated and it's appropriate. And that curriculum empowers people with disability for places of work. Because not all of us are going to be scientists, not all of us are going to be PhD graduates in governance and philosophy, etc. We're not all going to be that. But some of us need to be very good call center agents. Some of us need to be very good at particular skills that require our physical ability. So why, when we align curriculum, how do we make sure that for people with disability, it is aligned to the economy and the economic needs that they need, and that they can be able to fulfill? And then lastly, and more crucially, not only are we dealt with curriculum, infrastructure, budgeting, but the communal support. Because there's stigmatization still today with people with disabilities. When a child arrives in a wheelchair, we assume that child is intellectually challenged, whatever. And we don't seek out the best ways to say, how do we assess communally what the potential of these children are? We cannot have stigmatization, neither can we have a situation where for people with disability, they are marginalized to the periphery of society. My view is always integration. How do we make sure they are living in communities with people so that you don't create isolation? So for people with, in this particular instance, I would want to invite, and that's where BOSA sits, and that's why I chair the budget committee, to fight harder to make sure that the budget is sufficient for people in this regard.
Thank you so much for that insightful answer. I will now be handing over to Mbali, my colleague. Over to you.
Good day, Mr. Good day, Mr. Maimane. My name is Mbali Cindi. And my name is Mbali Cindi. I would like to know, should your party win governance, places like police stations, hospitals, clinics, there's no sign language interpreters. How would you fix that problem?
Firstly, thank you for bringing that to my attention. And secondly, let me say this, that what we need is additional resources and budgeting that goes into ensuring that sign language interpretation is available at every public institution. Now, to achieve that means that one, we need, and this is where technology can help us. You know, we in South Africa agreed that in the Constitution, 12 languages, of which one of them is sign language. It must be mandated that at a basic level, people can learn those. So in any hospital, someone must be trained in sign language because it's the law now. And when you make a language a law and an official language, it means you have to provide curriculum for it. It means you have to provide funding for it. And thirdly, it means that you have to ensure that it can be utilized in official spaces, which not only is it schools, hospitals, police stations, but it's also the courts. If you go to a court and you want to make your case in sign language, it must be allowed to do so. So I guess what I'm trying to allude to is we've gone past the first hurdle. Now we have to go to the next hurdle, which is about making sure that actually we've got capacity, we fund for it, but also the community of people who speak sign language needs to be in this able to be able to, when we do all of these triple BEE funding, we often deploy people with disability towards call centers. What we don't do is we need to deploy them into hospitals, police stations, etc. And I think it can be a law that no public facility does not have sign language interpretation. Can be law, and that's not complicated to do. So, BOSA, what you've laid now for me is to say, how do we go out now in Parliament and fight more for the enaction of that law and the budget for it?
Thank you so much, Mr. Maimane. I will now be handing over to my colleague, Victor. Good day, Mr. Maimane. My name is Victor Koza. And I would like to find out from you, the crime rates in this country have increased significantly. So I would like to know, should you become president, how would you eradicate the amount of crime that's happening in our country?
Firstly, Victor, one, you are dressed so good looking. I feel like I should have been warned to also dress up in a more good looking way so I can match you. Thank you. But I say that, Victor, to you, that crime in this country occurs for many different reasons. The first one is that we've lost our values as a society. So if I was president of the republic, I'd want to bring back that value of Ubuntu. People commit crimes where they've forgotten that we are dealing with fellow human beings. There are certain crimes not enough policing will help with, because the reality of it is that when somebody ill-treats a woman, even by cat whistling, all of these insulting things, or when, particularly for people with disability, the stigmatization when we treat people on wheelchairs, etc., etc. We have to come back to saying, what is the value? That a person is a person, umtu ngumtu. That's, we must start there. Because societies that are stable have got common values. But the second and more important issue, the police have been underfunded for the last 15 years. They train 11,000 in 3 years, they lose 6,000 every year. The ratio of policing to citizen, for example, International benchmarking says there must be one policeman for every 350 people. We end up with, in certain communities, 1 to 600. And for example, in Dobsonville, where I come from, it's 1 is to 1,200. We need to come back to say, how do we make sure that we increase the number of police? So I would take 4 billion rands from VIP protection, which is 4 billion rands that protects politicians, and put it into the police budget. Because once it's in the police budget, you can make sure that the police are able to be increased in numbers to fight in their communities. The second thing is I would decentralize police. We've got a South African National Police Service. I want to make sure that what the Metro Police do is amended to make sure that once they're amended, you can put people, Metro Police, to fight certain crimes so that you increase the force immediately. And that's a minor amendment in the Metro Police Act so that you've got more police on the ground. Thirdly, there are more private security than there is public security. So let's merge those two so that you have an Uber-like response. So if you as a citizen call for police, the closest vehicle must respond immediately, whether that vehicle is public or private. And then lastly, the capacity of police stations. Let's make sure police stations are stronger, because police stations at this point in time, if you go to a police station, the security is poor, the guns in police stations are taken out, etc. Let's build infrastructure and prioritize murder, because murder rates in this country are, so there are over 63 to 70 South Africans killed every day, somewhere in that range. Therefore, if you want to deal with the murder question, we have to prioritize it and deal with the criminal justice system. If you commit a murder in this country, your chances of ending up in jail are 1 in 5. So we have to make sure that arrests take place in such a way that once you arrest somebody, they're able to eventually end up in jail. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. But those are some of the interventions that deal with how we respond. And then appoint the best leadership in police. You know, since 1994, only one police commissioner finished their term. The rest, since 1994, have been suspended due to corruption, whatever. Only George Fivers finished their term. We have to make sure that when we appoint the police commissioner, it's the most competent person who can do their job.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maimane.
Yeah.
You want to ask another question?
Sure, certainly.
Good day once again, Mr. Maimane. It's me, Tinama Mgudra. Youth unemployment continues to rise and many young youth feels forgotten by government. If BOSA would earn power after the national elections, what immediate action would you take in the first 100 days to create job opportunities?
I've always said I want to introduce a youth civilian service. What that means is that previously we used the army for young people to go learn some skills. Here we are saying let's create a civilian service so that in every province, in every city, young people can find internship work that they can go work at. Because especially for 1 year after school, what we often find is that young people leave school and then workplaces say, no, we want experience, we want this. Not all of us are going to go to university. Give young people a year's program where they can go work in our courts, they can go work in our hospitals, schools, etc. Because that will fuel their employment prospects, give them an opportunity to work. But then the third and most crucial is that we then post that are able to say to ourselves, look, once all of that is done, we can then be able to create an economy that is growing. And one of the things that I do as an economist is to look at what are the prospects of economic growth. And I've always said to me that we've got to build massive infrastructure that is rail driven. So I would introduce, that won't be in the first 100 days, but we'll go beyond that, a train service that's a bullet train between Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Bloemfontein, and Northwest. The reason you do that is that you create jobs in manufacturing, you create jobs in building and construction, and also you create new economic nodes. At this point in time, young people in Mpumalanga can't find jobs because tourism. If you want to try and get to the Kruger National Park as a tourist, it's hard work. Imagine if we had a bullet train that lets you go through that. Integration with Bloemfontein and Northwest, you create an economic hub where people can go. And then the economy as it is, we need to create alternative economies. So young people can go into the care economy, which is being undercounted for, where young people are looking up offering services. We look at the social services, where young people are able to volunteer and work in that and earn a great living out of that. And then stimulate SMMEs. Those are alternate economies, the education economy. How many young people are working in the ECD sector, for argument's sake? We need to increase that because that's a combination of an ECD coupled with a young person who's developing skills. So I do believe, without a shadow of a doubt, we can create economic opportunities for more young people in different sectors, but that's narrowly defining young people and then increasing economic growth in that regard.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maimane. Thank you so much. Any other colleague who has a question for Mr. Mmusi Maimane, or is time over for us?
Yes, I think Tina, Victor has a question, and we'll close with Victor, and then you will have to close after Victor has asked his question, and Dr. Maimane has already answered his question. Then you will close the session because he has given us only 20 minutes of his time, so that we can be able to wrap up. Yes.
No, and it's a great honor to be here. I hope today is not the last day. We must do it more regularly because we learn from each other and we work with each other. So Vicky, I can't thank you enough for inviting me. Let me take that last question, but I can't thank you enough, really.
Over to you, Victor.
Okay, Lebo. His question, he wanted to find out whether Dr. Maimane, will he be willing to learn sign language? That was his question.
Great. I'd love to do that. I'm being honest, I speak 8 out of the 12 languages in South Africa. Sign language must be one that I learn. And you know what's exciting for me? I was in China and India, and what those countries have done is through AI teach sign language. So technology helps us now. So I'm hoping that we can proliferate technology so that it's not just me, but more people. But if you are willing to tutor me, I would love to learn sign language, and certainly because it is constitutionally required. But not only that, it's an opportunity to connect with citizens on the other end, and I would love to do that and learn the language.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mmusi Maimane. It was our very, very biggest pleasure to have you with us today, and hope, as you've mentioned before the last question, that this won't be for the last time. We will continue having you with us in studio, and wish you all the best in whatever whatever you're fighting for the citizens to have, and we honor you, and we say we salute you from the Diary Series of Deaf People. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
I love all of you, and thank you for having me. My heart is full. NgesiXhosa kuthiwa inhliziyo yami idade emafutheni. I never
Yeah,
understood
you
what
very
that.
good.
Now I understand.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so
Much love.
much.